All right, testing. Let's see where the latency is and if this ever gets through. Should be coming back. Where is... I still don't hear anything.
All right, testing.
There we go. All right. Okay, so this is dropping into Pipeline Audio number 21, and just start getting the test results from all the crazy testing I've been doing. And first of all, I'm going to go to my page, pipelineaudio.net, and in articles, I still don't know what to call this, so I just have articles, real gear measurements, and from there, go to direct boxes. This is the one I have the most finished so far, and but there's a lot to this. So let me pull up. Here's basically the output of the measuring software I was using called Rightmark Audio Analyzer, and I'm going to make all the Rightmark files available to you as well, so that you can just pull these in, and you'll get a lot more detail than I'm actually showing on this page. But what I've been testing here in their setup anyways, frequency response multi-tone, and that's made by playing a couple different tones together and deriving a frequency response measurement from that. The noise level, that's A-weighted. Dynamic range, that's A-weighted. I'm not really sure too much the difference there. Total harmonic distortion in percentage. Intermodulation distortion plus noise in percentage. Intermodulation distortion plus noise in swept frequencies, and in that case, I'll show you this in a second actually. For those who are just listening, you won't be able to see this as well, but I'll explain it a little bit. Frequency response with a swept sine, and total harmonic distortion with swept frequency. So let me start pulling up these graphs just to show what we're getting. So the well, actually, wait, I can't do this on here. Sorry. Let me pull this up on something else. The total harmonic distortion using the sweeps and the IMD plus the sweeps will actually show you what kind of distortion you're getting. So this will help a little bit. But mainly, to me, what I'm really looking at, the point of all this was that there's a lot of claims being made. One is that certain devices are way more transparent than others. If transparency is your goal, that's actually a pretty easy thing, I think, to measure. So first of all, in transparency, I'm looking at frequency response. How flat is the output versus the input? There's going to be a lot of God of the gaps arguments in here, and that somehow things are different in real life or whatever. But in general, I think we can really take that one to the bank. Noise, again. The measurement that this shows is A-weighted noise, signal to noise ratio, and that could mean that, just like dither, you might have noise kind of pushed into one area. So it doesn't tell you everything, but the graph does, or the graph helps a lot. So let me pull up one of these graphs that compares a couple different devices. You can actually see where the noises are clustered at. Actually, I'm just pulled up the distortion. Sorry, let me pull up the noise. So you can kind of see where noise is clustered, and often you will have noise more biased to one area than another. If A-weighted noise is really important, then often you'll see people putting noise at the extreme lows and extreme highs, where that's not going to be taken into the measurement anyway. But in general, you can see the noise floor through the graphs, and you get a pretty good idea from the direct readout as well. So really, this is divided into two things. I'm showing some graphs. I'm showing a graph of frequency response. I'm showing a graph of total harmonic distortion, and I'm showing a graph of noise. And The graph for total harmonic distortion is really just a like a 1K sine wave, and then we're looking at what kind of harmonics are generated after that. And again, this isn't even right to call this a God of the gaps kind of argument. That really doesn't tell you everything, but I think it does tell you enough. Because, you know, one claim is about transparency, another is about character. And so I would think that an area as critical to the human voice as 1K, for instance, when you're talking about mic preamps, it's gonna, whatever character you're looking for, it's gonna show up there. You know, whatever you're gonna distort from 1K, it's gonna distort your voice. So if really there's really character there, we're gonna see the character. And you know, magical vintage devices made out of unobtainium or whatever might have a goofy frequency response. They might be extremely nonlinear when it comes to distortion, so the higher you turn it up, the more it'll distort. They might respond to distortion in different frequencies in different ways, and that's really where the IMD chart should show it. But for the most part, even among these magical vintage devices or whatever, the distortion is really extremely linear. There was one Neve device where it wasn't quite that linear, but still yet it's so far below what's probably really audible in the real world that I really don't know that particular character exists. I think so much of this is just confirmation bias. You know, the Texas sharpshooter fallacy where, you know, you shoot a couple of bullets and wherever they land, you draw a bullseye around them. Or, you know, confirmation bias, where we think we're going to hear something, so we do hear it. But we've seen time and time again when double-blinded tests were done that people really, even the experts and whoever, the biggest marketing claimers, the biggest hype masters, these things really didn't have... They really couldn't tell the difference between these things. And often they would pick the cheapest devices. And as we're going to see, sometimes the cheapest devices are the most academic, and they just go straight for transparency. And it may be that the cheaper device that really, just from the ground up, goes kind of the academic route may end up with some of the better specs when you're talking about transparency. So, you know, there's the character thing that we're really testing. There's the transparency thing that we're really testing, and that is objective. I mean, that's really objective. We're looking at, how true to the input source is it? And to me, that's the definition of transparency. Ethan Weiner has some other parameters as well, time-based stuff, and I would really like to get some time-based kind of measurements in here, but to me, if the thing can pass super high frequencies, I think the times are pretty much covered. So let's go through these. So we had several of these things. Had an ART Dual MP, ART Phantom 1, Phantom Powered Direct Box. The Countryman Type 85, that's a classic everybody talks about. Some of the onboard ones on the audio interfaces, like the Focusrite 18i20 Generation 2. I did the Focusrite Octoprix Mark II's direct box, and I actually have Carbo Music takes issue with me calling these direct boxes, but whatever. They're interface instrument inputs. To me, they accomplish the same goal, so I'm really not sure where we're going with that, but he had an explanation, and it kind of made sense. I tested some iOS devices, the IK Multimedia iRig HD2. Also did the M Audio Fast Track USB. I think this is one of the most ancient USB audio interfaces. It still works. I tested a bunch of the radial boxes, including the reamp. And I know that's not a DI, but I did want to see what happened when it comes back. I tested the Rapco, which is like this ultra cheap passive think transformer based DI box. And it was so cheap that I really just used to throw it in the kids, our kids' rock bands bags, just so in case they needed a DI, it's in there. And if it got lost, I really wasn't worried about it. which is going to be funny because when we come back to some of these results, I'll talk about it. Also tried out the Sonoma Wireworks guitar jack, stage, and studio jack minis, which are iOS devices, but they also have ASIO interfaces, ASIO drivers. Okay, and this is going to get ugly because I'm pretty sure one of the ones I tested out was the UK Sound 1173, which had a DI output. Let me pull this up because I'm pretty sure that you know I talk a lot about hype. We're constantly seeing hype all the time. And one of the hypiest channels, and he seems to be a nice guy and stuff, but I mean, it really is just piles and piles and piles of hype. And somebody who's constantly talking about vintage mic preamps and vintage this and that is Warren Hewitt at Produce Like a Pro. And I'll be trying to talk to him about this particular product later on, but a lot of people are going to tell me that this wasn't a very good choice for the Neve 1073 or, you know, whatever, a vintage device. But being as Warren Hewitt, you know, is one of the guys who constantly talks about this kind of things, I would think that he would do his best to make it accurate. And it says that this is the 1173. I'm reading from the Vintage King website. The UK Sound 1173 is the result of a design collaboration between Los Angeles-based producer Warren Hewitt and gear designer Michael Stucker, produced and manufactured by UK Sound. So I'm assuming that Warren has his stamp of approval on this thing, and I've seen there's some videos of him showing it. So I'm thinking that he probably, you know, believes in this thing, and so I'm gonna go on and say that, you know, go ahead and dispute me, and we will be testing some other 1073s and other Neve mic preamps, but I really do believe that. I think Warren believes it too, that this is probably a good example. And so that had a DI input, and of course I checked that as well. And then the final device I tested or actually there's a couple more devices. Some of the more devices that I tested in this round were, I think, just as a straight DI, the most expensive one in this shootout, the Yuri 325. And I also tried out the Waves PRS GTR interfaces, which are direct boxes, but interestingly can come out at mic level or line level. So I'm going to go through this. One of the charts I think that people will be most interested in is I did a head-to-head between one of the cheapest, the Rapco DB100, one of the absolute studio standards, the Radial JDI, which is about a $200 device, and the Yuri 325, which you'll see all the time. These marketing people and vintage fanatics and stuff will talk about as being this magical, shoots godlike laser beams out when you plug a guitar in, whatever. Most expensive one. I don't think they make it anymore. I see them around $300-400 now for sale. So let's compare them. So if I zoom all the way in to 1/10 of a decibel, on the frequency response chart, the Radial JDI and the Rapco are almost neck and neck. There's some deviation, maybe a 0.05 of a dB between the Radial JDI and the Rapco DB100. Now, this was shocking to me because I expected the Radial JDI to be miles above this Rapco, you know, especially being as these are transformer type devices. And you'll constantly hear that transformers are magical and impart all this crazy magic into the sound and all this distortion and this magical frequency response boost. So you should put these magical transformer plugins on every channel, or buy a transformer-based mixer and do all this magical transformer stuff. It looks to me like, at least in the case of these two devices, that's a bunch of hooey. These are almost ruler flat. I mean, there's maybe a 1/10 of a decibel deviation from ruler flat, and that's it. Now, so I really want to let's kick that myth gone. The transformers do not add some magical thing. At least I'm not seeing it here. They definitely don't add some magical thing to the frequency response. Or if they do, the transformers like these are meant to be flat and are flat. And one of the tests I did was to test the transparency of these things at different gain levels. And in both the Rapco and the Radial, there really isn't much difference. In fact, I'm going to pull that up so that we don't get too confused here. So I'm sorry for those of you who are just listening, but I'm going to try to describe these as best as I can. I'm going to pull up the Radial JDI's frequency response versus level. And, let me pull that up. So some of these charts will compare all three levels at the same time. I'm going to pull up the Rapco as well. So I want you to understand. So when I tested these things, the Radial JDI didn't matter if it was at super high levels, super low levels, whatever. The frequency response was, as far as I can tell, identical. Same thing with the Rapco. So that one's out the window. I just want to say, for the most part, when people are being told that they need to use transformers, they need to buy this special transformer or whatever, at least in the case of these DI boxes, the transformer is just about ruler flat, and it just doesn't make any difference. Now, the Yuri 325, the most expensive device on this one, had a severe roll-off. The roll-off started around 3K or so, and then got a lot bigger as you got higher up. And I have a feeling that this is why this particular DI is so popular for bass guitar here in Hawaii. A lot of the bass done here is Hawaiian music, which is kind of like reggae-ish from the 1970s, kind of, but Hawaiian themed, you know. And one of the things they like is that they don't really like any clank on the bass. So as much as you can roll off on the top end, the better. In fact, like those U basses where they're like ukuleles with rubber strings. Those are real popular for this kind of sound, and so this DI would probably make a lot of sense for it. But so I say one of the myths that this definitely busts is what you pay for. Yeah, in fact, in this case, you get the inverse. If you want the most high quality transparent device, the $40 one is actually the closest to zero on here, which is kind of crazy, but there you go. So I'm going to look at total harmonic distortion between the devices. Let me pull that up. Go back up to the top. So when we're looking at total harmonic distortion, most of these devices, they're like 60 or 70 decibels down before you see the distortion components. And that's really at any level that you give it. I'm looking at the highest levels right now. So I'm not seeing that magical transformer distortion. I'm not seeing character. I mean, this distortion is so far down there. Now, when I look at noise, again, the Yuri, the expensive DI, is the noisiest. The quietest one actually is that Rapco. And when I go to look at the actual printed measurements from Right Mark Audio Analyzer, one of the things that I did write down on these DIs was the relative output given the same input. And the output of the Rapco DB100 was actually higher than the JDI. And that's going to have a little bit to do with these measurements here. So in terms of absolute noise level, the Rapco was the quietest. It's 1 or 2 decibels quieter than the JDI, which means nothing. At minus 110 or whatever, who cares for a decibel? You're not going to hear that. You can say you will, but that's just God of the gaps. Total harmonic distortion, the Rapco DB100 is actually a little bit less distortion than the JDI, but again, the distortion is so far down there, I don't think it's gonna matter. So in this case, the spec-wise, the cheapest device, the Rapco DB100, actually tested the best out of every single DI that I tested on this whole thing, which is just mind-blowing. I didn't expect that at all. Not in any way, shape, or form. That just seems ridiculous to me, but there you go. The radials, as you'd expect, tested really well. One thing that I didn't expect to see was that the JDI, the radial JDI, wasn't much different than the radial Pro D2 or the Pro AV2. These devices were extremely similar to the Pro DI. I'll pull that up. I mean, I don't think you would ever hear a difference in a blind ABX test. Now, you want bang for your buck. If you really want this radial stuff, the AV2 is cheaper than the JDI, and it's also the Pro D2 is even cheaper than that. I think another $10 less. And both of those devices have 2 DI inputs rather than 1. They do have plastic input jacks rather than the metal ones on the JDI. So I think the JDI is going to be a little bit more bomb-proof. But for studio use, you're getting twice as many DIs that have pretty much the same performance for slightly less money. So JDI is great. It's something. It's the same circuit pretty much that we used to use over at Vintage. So, I feel comfortable with it. But in all honesty, any of these DIs should be about the same. And I know that we want to believe different things about these, but really, it's just not true. One of the weirdest findings was that the Radial Pro DI, which I thought would just be half of a Pro D2, actually was 6 decibels less output than the Pro D2 or the Pro AV2, and that resulted in the noise figures and distortion that you would expect. You're a little bit lower on the output, so the noise is going to seem a little bit higher. But again, it's so far down there. Testing the radial reamp, you lose a little bit of high end. I think that in total we're dropping about 22 decibels from line level in order to get it back into the guitar amp. That's what reamps are for. But it did have an extremely high output, minus 12, about I think 6 decibels higher than the JDI. But again, remember, that's not a DI. So some of the funny things here. The Art Dual MP DI was pretty skewed. Had some really screwy, and this one was really level dependent. The distortion went way up depending on what you're feeding it. But again, it's a tube device. Weird, whatever. The Art Phantom 1, it actually turned out pretty good. Noise wasn't that great. I think one of the ones that everybody wants to know about is the Countryman Type 85, because this is such a popular DI device. Now it's pretty flat until you get around 12K or so, and then it had a roll off. But even at 20K, it wasn't even down 1 decibel. If you absolutely want to preserve your highest frequencies all the way up, pick the Rapco or pick the JDI. But I don't think it's really not going to make much difference. It does have that roll off, and sometimes the roll offs mean phase. So maybe there's a phase problem up there. I don't know. So maybe the Countryman. I know the Countryman is super popular, and I know it's, that's what everybody uses and great and stuff. But you know what? The noise wasn't that good. It was actually around the same as some of these cheaper prosumer direct boxes or audio interface direct boxes. The distortion was pretty low, pretty amazingly low. But noise wise, and again, I don't think you're going to hear it. The noise is way down there, minus 95 decibels with a minus 18 input. I don't think you're going to hear it. But again, what are you paying for when you buy this Countryman? You're not getting as good of its frequency responses as the cheapy Rapco. You're not getting as good of noise as the cheapy Rapco. I don't know what you're paying for, and so I'm sorry, but I know the Countryman is a studio standard and everybody's standard. But honestly, if I were to buy stuff, or if I'm telling people what I would think, I wouldn't recommend it. You're paying a lot of money for lower performance, and I'm sorry, maybe I'm wrong. You can tell me where I'm wrong on this, but this is really a lot of the point of these tests is, what are you getting for your money? And to me, paying for that Countryman, you're actually getting less performance than some of these cheaper things. And so one of the things, I really want to have Jim Roseberry on because, he's the interface guy. But one thing that he was saying was that the interface inputs, DI inputs are horrible. But I don't want to disagree with him too much, but here we go. Here's the Focusrite 18i20 Gen 2. And I'm not sure how this is going to be compared to like a Scarlett 2i2 or something, which I want to test next because the 18i20 you plug in with an IEC cable. It's an actual, you plug in a power cable to it, so it's not USB powered, so that might change things a lot. But if we look at the spectrum response, it's within 0.1 dB of flat, of completely flat, and that's at any gain level. So in terms of transparency, when it comes to frequency response, the Focusrite 18i20 absolutely dominates the Countryman Type 85. It just does. It does better than some of the other stuff that we're going to see in a little while that you pay a whole lot of money for. It's about the same as the JDI, within a tenth of a decibel of the JDI. So that's what you're getting from the 18i20 Gen 2, frequency response-wise. Now, when we go to look at the noise figures and stuff, it's not as quiet as the Rapco or the most of the radial stuff. It actually is as quiet as the Radial Pro DI. It's a little bit noisier than the JDI and the Rapco, but it is quieter than the Countryman Type 85, and the distortion is about the same. So I know Jim said that interface inputs weren't that good, but at least in the case of this Focusrite 18i20, they are. As anything that I can measure here, it's as honestly as I don't think you'd be able to tell the difference between that and these dedicated radial direct boxes. You could measure them different, but I don't think they're going to turn out much different. The Focusrite Octapre Mark II mic preamp set, it has some instrument inputs, and again, they're even flatter than the Octapre Mark II, and I think they're a little bit quieter. Let me check the noise. They're as quiet as the radial JDIs and things. So that's the Focusrite Octapre Mark II. Instrument inputs are absolutely awesome as direct boxes. Now looking at the IK Multimedias, it's funny because if I pull up the picture, you'll see that they're extremely screwy looking frequency response. But when you really zoom in, it's still within ±1 decibel. But because of how screwy it looks, I'm a little bit worried that that's a phase issue. And when I'm looking at the noise and distortion and stuff, iRig HD2 is significantly noisy than any of these most of these dedicated direct boxes. And the frequency response, like I said, is a little bit weird, and the distortion, it's pretty high up there. Actually, it's you're getting up there into the percentage ranges. So that's what you're getting from these iOS things. The ancient M Audio Fast Track actually ended up being pretty flat. Distortion was okay, but it was a lot more noisy than some of the more modern devices. Not super noisy, but around the iRig 2 level. So whatever on that one. So then I think pretty much the last big thing that I really want to talk about, and I said a lot about this earlier, and I do want to talk to Warren Hewitt about this. This is the UK Sound 1173. I'm just going to pull up some of from the graphs here, and I'm going to pull up the chart. And we're going to see this when we look at mic preamps, and maybe next week or in a couple weeks. I don't know that this is representative of what Neve 1073s are supposed to sound like. But again, since this is somebody who's constantly talking about these vintage mic preamps and stuff, I figure this is what he thinks these things sound like. We have a giant bump below 100 hertz, and then a huge roll off so that by 40 hertz, this thing is out of the picture. So there's going to be a big phase goofy response because of a filter that steep. And then as that bump goes away, it gets flat-ish around 600 hertz. And then after like 1.2K or so, it starts rolling off. And to the point where around 20K, we're going to see a decibel down. Again, that's not that much. It looks a lot more extreme than it is. But this thing isn't as transparent as a cheap DI. And this is about the same frequency responses you're going to see on the mic preamp. It's just not that transparent. Again, it's within plus or minus 3 decibels. But is that the Neve sound? Is a 1 decibel bump at 80 hertz? You could get that with an EQ. And then a roll-off, a shelving roll-off, somewhere around 3K or so with maybe a 6 decibel, 12 decibel shelf. Is that the Neve sound? Is that really what you're paying all the bajillions of dollars for? Is this little deviation here? Again, it's not as good as a cheapie. The cheapie is going to be more transparent. But if you want this sound, I think you can get this with an EQ. I know that's blasphemy, and that totally, no, you can't get it with an EQ, but I think you can. If we look at distortion, this 1073 does get significantly more distorted at higher frequencies. It is nonlinear, which is interesting. And let me say something about this vintage stuff. So a lot of times people talk about warm when it comes to vintage, especially with tubes, but even with transistors. And we did see that this thing does have a slight bump at the low end. But what the distortion does when it comes to this vintage stuff, when it comes to this tube stuff, which again, 1073 is not a tube, but you're going to see this on the tube things. Usually that vintage character is actually a high frequency boost. It becomes more distorted on the higher frequencies. And that's what you're getting. You're getting harmonics. You're not getting this low end bump. You're getting treble boosting. You're getting more presence and stuff. And I think that's really what a lot of this is. So like a plugin like Type A or especially Audio Assault's Exciter plugin, you get that. And I know that this is a totally different formula and it's a completely different recipe, and the Neve version is magic and the plugin version is crap, but whatever. That's what you're getting. Again, now the Neve's distortion is a lot closer. So you're talking like minus 50 below what you're putting in, around there someplace. So you might hear this distortion. I don't think you're going to hear much of it. People are going to say you are, but I don't think so. So if you compress the hell out of this, you're probably going to bring the distortion up. And I can see it getting to the point where you are going to hear it. Let's look at these. Let's look at the, here's the noise. It's not bad. But now looking at the results, the dBA noise level, it's pretty high up there. It's not as bad as the cheapest junk, but it's significantly worse than the Rapco. It's significantly worse than any of the interface DI inputs. I think the M Audio, the original ancient M Audio, is worse than this, but not by much. The distortion is significant on this guy, of course. And like you saw, the frequency response was goofy. So if you want transparent, if you like the sound of your guitar, you like the sound of your bass, and you want to make that, if you just want to put that into the recording system the way it sounds, get one of these radials, or honestly, for even better performance, get this cheapy Rapco. I think the thing costs $40. I'm not kidding. I do want to talk to Warren about this 1173 though. But again, as screwy as this frequency response looks, it's not really that crazy. It's still within plus or minus 3 decibels, maybe even less than that. And then finally, I want to show. We already saw that Yuri perform pretty badly if you're talking about transparency. One of the weird ones is anything with waves on it, people either love it or hate it. The people who love it, talk about how amazingly great these guys are. But when we really look at the frequency response here, 1.2 decibels, and especially the distortion. This Waves GTR thing, frequency response, it's 4 dB down at 20K, and it's 1 dB down by 6K. Otherwise, it's reasonably flat up to about 2K, maybe 1K. So this isn't a very good performing device. And worse than this thing can't be phantom powered. And the distortion is about significantly more. It's about the same level at the beginning as the vintage UK Sound 1173, but then it just keeps on generating harmonics from there. So this isn't a very transparent device. I don't think they're making it anymore. Couldn't be phantom powered. It's not very flat. This just wasn't a good device. But I remember people shrieking from the hills about it because it said Paul Reed Smith on it, and it was like the greatest thing in the world. But turns out not so good. I did measure a couple of these because I do have 2 of them, and I got about the same out of each one. And so that's where we are. And I think next week I'm going to talk about mic preamp interfaces. I'm going to try and get a hold of Warren Hewitt at Produce Like a Pro, and maybe we can talk about that 1073 a little bit. And I need some more mic preamps to test. I do still have some that I haven't tested yet. I need more audio interfaces to test. I think, and I'm just going to say it. At this point, if I were to buy a DI, I think I've tested enough of what's out there. I'll do some more audio interface DI tests. I'm going to be doing the universal audio stuff. Again, I don't have much confidence in universal audio. I know that people love them and that they're amazing and magical and whatever else, but if you know the history with Reaper and stuff, you know why we don't have much confidence in universal audio. They may have changed since then, so we'll see. But I could use some more interfaces to test, and but again, at this point with the mic, with the DIs, if you want to buy a good DI, go buy that Rapco. I'm going to test some more cheapies and see if they're all pretty much around there. But that Rapco DB100, let's just type it in. Let's find out. Rapco DB100. Let's see if anybody's selling it. Yonda's Music has them for $40. Reverb's out of stock, so I don't know. Maybe they don't make these things anymore. They're all over on eBay. I'll see if I can't find something that's still for sale for sure. Is Rapco even in business anymore? Maybe they're not. Rapco Horizon. So there's probably a Horizon branded version of this direct box. So what's a Blox? Is a Blox a direct box? I don't know. Pro devices. Let's see what we got. Oh yeah, here's a DB1 direct box, DB2 direct box. I'll see if I can get my hands on one of these. It's $47. A Rapco DB1 looks like it's a similar device. We'll test it out and see if it's the same. It could be, but there you go. If you can find one of these Rapco DB100s, buy it. Any of the radial stuff is good. Maybe skip the Pro DI, but the AV2, the Pro D2, and the JDI, those are all good devices. And the interface that comes with your Focusrite 18i20 is perfectly good. It's really good. Sorry, Jim, but that's the way I'm seeing it. So I'll see you guys later. This has been dropping in at Pipeline Audio number 21, and later.